A local kayak angler nearly lost his life while he was out coho fishing out on Lake Michigan and fell into the frigid cold waters of the lake. We're going to talk about it in today's video. This is a very important one. If you're new here, welcome to the Lake Michigan Kayak Fishing Podcast. My name is Michael, the ChiCityYaker, specialize in Lake Michigan kayak fishing content. So if you want to learn more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Now, this all was brought to my attention directly from the individual that experienced this. They emailed me right after this happened, explaining, oh my God, I should have took your advice on those videos and the stuff that you say about safety, because this is what happened. And when I read that, I was in complete shock. I mean, by all accounts, when you hear this story, he has a guardian angel looking after him, because it's a crazy story. We're going to get to the video. He put up a video on his YouTube channel, which we're going to take a look at. But then he shared this story in my Lake Michigan Kayak Fishing group on Facebook. His name is Ernesto. He's also a charter captain, and he recently got into kayak fishing just this season, this spring. And he shared his story, made it public so that others can learn from his mistakes, which I commend him for, because sometimes there's this sentiment that if you fall in, it's a shameful experience, which I don't think that's should be the case. I fell in early on in my time on Lake Michigan. Thankfully, it was 70-degree water in August, I believe it happened, or late July when I fell in because of a mishap, and was able to recover. And thankfully, there was a charter boat around that came by just to check that I was okay. But it happens, and I don't think if it happens to you that you should feel ashamed to share the story so that others can learn from it, but to each their own. But I do commend them for sharing this, so that we can talk about it and raise awareness, because there are things in this story that I'm going to point out could have been avoided. This situation could have been avoided entirely. The post here, I'm not going to read through the entire post, but he does point out a couple of things here, which are some lessons learned. Boating experience does not equate to kayak experience. When this couldn't be any more correct. Like, this is so true. He's a charter boat captain, and he just got into kayak fishing, and it's a very different experience in the boat versus a kayak. He also talks about investing in a dry suit, which we're going to talk about, practicing going overboard and re-entry, keeping additional safety equipment on your vest, all important things. And as he says here, I made some rookie kayak mistakes, and he's going to learn from that near-death experience. So thankfully, he's here to share the story, because this is a wild one. Let's go ahead and go over to his YouTube channel. I'll link to it down below so you guys can give him a follow, and for more of his content as well. But he was kind enough to post this up here for all of us to take a look at. So let's jump into it. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to jump in as various points that I want to, add to the conversation and point things out. So let's do it.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? So I just had the scare of my life a little while ago. Today did not go as planned, and it was probably one of the most terrifying moments of my entire life. I wanted to do this video right now. I just got my kayak. I had to drag it about a good 1.5 miles in the sand.
Oof, that's rough.
So basically what happened today is I came out onto Lake Michigan out in Waukegan. Conditions looked to be okay. About 1 to 1.5 footers.
Now I'm going to jump on this first point, because this is where essentially all of this could have been avoided. I distinctly remember this day when he went out, and the water was not really ideal. There was a lot of waves on the water. Now he says, it was about to be like 1 to 1.5 out there. Experiencing 1 and 1.5 or so waves in a boat is completely different than experiencing it in a kayak. It's completely two different worlds. In fact, on that day, even I wouldn't have gone out.
Winds about 10 miles an hour. So fairly okay. There was other kayakers out, other boaters out. I left out of Waukegan Harbor. I went east, and then I decided to go north towards the power plant. I was about a good mile from shore, trolling north.
Okay, here's another point I'm going to make about this, what he said about where he was location wise. In these situations where the water is very cold, even for me, I don't like to venture far out into the open water, specifically because something like this can happen. And when you're out there by yourself, in these frigid cold temps, you don't have anybody immediately in your area to assist you. If you're fishing out in front of the harbors or just in the vicinity of the harbor mouth, there's other boats and kayakers around. So if you get into some kind of an emergency, you can yell or whistle or use your air horn to call for assistance. And you're more than likely going to get help a lot quicker than if you're off by yourself in these conditions. Remember, we're talking about the water temps are in the mid 40s right now. Extremely cold, extremely cold. So this is an area for those of you that are thinking about going out. Think about where you're going to be out in the water. If there's an emergency situation, are you around people that can actually help you in a reasonable amount of time? If you venture too far away, you're off by yourself, something happens, it's going to be a lot more challenging to get that assistance. You're going to have to wait for someone to come find you or get you or respond to your calls, whether it's on the radio or to the Coast Guard. You know, the thing about it is right now, these fish are close enough that you don't have to go far ways away. So keep that in mind when you're going out, where you're going to be at, and try to stay around where there's going to be other people close enough that you can get some help. I understand that some people like to break away and get away from the crowds, but I think you kind of have to weigh that against your safety, and that's some more food for thought.
Conditions, you know, the winds picked up a little bit, but still nothing that was horribly bad or nothing that I felt uncomfortable being in. So I had just finished hooking up on a fish. I was fighting it, ended up losing it, and there was a boater about a good half mile from me going towards the harbor, and I eventually got the wake end of his boat, which hit my kayak perfectly and tipped me over.
Listen, I can tell you that is probably one of the scariest ways to go in, is when you don't pay attention to the boat wakes as they're zipping by you, and you've got a pattern, you know, the water, there becomes a cadence out in the water when you're rolling into it with the waves and you're moving around. But then when you get that wake in combination with the actual, like the natural waves that are happening, it can throw you off your stability. You're not expecting that. You're rocking in the cadence of the waves, and then all of a sudden there's this out of sequence wave and it hits you and you're just thrown off. There's been quite a few times that I have been caught off guard. Thankfully, I haven't fallen in because of it, but I'm like, oh, you have to be careful from these boats and their wakes. It's just the reality of it. How you're going to handle it. I tend to just turn into it and just take them head on, and then go back to the, direction I was originally at. You don't really want to take those from the side, because this is what can be a result of that. And especially if you're not paying attention to the fact that it's coming your way, that will 100% catch you off guard. And I think you'd be more than likely to experience something potentially like this. So you always got to keep your head on the swivel when the boats are around, when they're zipping by, going to the fishing grounds, or if they're coming back in from a trip. Be really aware of their wash, where it's coming at, where it's going to hit you at, and just keep your head on that swivel at all times.
Water was about 42, 43 degrees.
Yeah, very cold.
As soon as I hit that water, I had everything underneath. First thing that happened was my body kind of went into shock because the water was so cold. And my life jacket got caught on something inside my kayak.
This is crazy.
And I was underneath the water for about a good 20 to 30 seconds trying to rip myself free from whatever it was hooked on.
Wow.
From underneath from inside my kayak. I have no idea what it got snagged on, but it kept me from coming to the top. And I mean, it was definitely one of the scariest things that ever happened to me.
I want to jump in here and add to this. This is why you want to carry a knife. I don't know for a fact whether he does or doesn't have a knife on his PFD, but this is a perfect example of why you should keep a knife on your PFD, because if you do realize you're hung on something, if you fall out and you're stuck on something, you need to pull it out and cut away at whatever that could be that's got you tied up. So super important, and this really speaks to why you should have a knife on your PFD.
You know, obviously once I ripped myself free, I was able to get some air. You know, the first thing I started doing is yelling for help, you know, trying to see if there was anybody that could hear me from shore. You know, there was nobody coming to help me.
And remember, this goes back to what I said about him venturing off, going a mile north towards the stacks out of Waukegan. He was out there by himself. All these other kayak anglers, I remember, because they reported in the Facebook group, they were fishing right out in front of the harbor area, right? They're near the harbor. In the event that something happens, there's more guys there. They got the guys on the pier. You've got more boaters around. You're more inclined to get help right away because there's people to see what's going on. And you venture off into the distance, this is a result of it. So another important lesson to keep in mind in these situations, you want to mitigate as much hazards as possible. And so this would be one area where you can do that by not venturing off too far.
I was too far. Conditions started to worsen a little bit.
It did. Picked up.
I was able, luckily I watched a lot of videos on how, if you flip over on your kayak, what to do. And you know what? I strongly recommend taking your kayak out and practicing with it. My kayak has a motor which is in the middle of my kayak. Some kayakers have it up in the front, some in the back. I never practice with my kayaking, you know, if I flipped over. But I've watched plenty of videos, and you know, after I was able to, you know, gain my composure, I was able to flip my kayak over. And you know, I was trying to get back in the kayak, but with the waves, I mean, it made it extremely difficult trying to reach over. And when I reached over towards the middle, the kayak immediately started wanting to flip back over towards the way that I, you know, and this was all just, you know, panicking, you know, at the moment. So I just calmed down just a little bit, took some breaths, and
which is a good thing to do. Stay calm as much as possible when you fall in. I distinctly remember when I fell in, the first few seconds I was in shock, like, wait, I was just sitting in my chair in the kayak. How am I in the water? I'm confused, right? So there's like a moment and there's a period where you're kind of just out of it, like, wait, what's going on right here? Once that quickly passes, or should pass, or at least focus up, so you can be like, okay, I need to focus, stay calm as possible. If you get frantic, it's only going to wear you out, expend energy. You're not going to be focused. Stay as calm as possible and just go step by step through the process of re-entry. And when he talks about re-entry out of your kayak, that's 100% true. But I will add this, and I think this is something that is important as well. When you practice re-entry in your kayak, you should, or I would recommend that you do this with your setup on there. What do I mean by that? Maybe not necessarily your electronics or whatever, but like your rod holders and any other things that you have along your gear tracks along the sides. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of guys will practice re-entry with a clean boat, right? There's nothing on it. They take off all the gear, all the stuff is off. If you look at the picture, kind of like what his kayak looks like now, it's all clean, nothing's up. Put your rod holders in. Put any other things that might be mounted along the sides. I'm not saying like your fishing gear, but just like anything that's gonna be mountable on there on the sides. And the reason why I recommend doing this is so that you can practice re-entering with the stuff that's gonna be there when you actually fall over. You're gonna have rod holders there. You're gonna have whatever any other thing that you might have mounted to the side. Maybe there's a anchor wizard thing there. Maybe you have whatever. It could be mounted to the side. You're gonna have to re-enter with that stuff in your way. So you should leave on one side of your kayak or the other a space opening wide enough, right, for you to be able to enter from that side. I think a lot of folks don't really think about that aspect of, oh, if I flip, I'm going to have all my rods out. I'm going to have the rod holders. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have my fish finder mounted, you know, up and all that stuff. And you go in, you might have practiced without the stuff on it. And then when it really happens, you're like, oh God, wait, this is not the same experience I had while I was practicing with nothing on the kayak. I probably should rethink where I position stuff because this is in my way. So another thing I wanted to point out that I think is overlooked or and important as well.
And I worked my way towards the back of the kayak and then I was able to just use my body to push myself up a little bit towards
he crawled
the back end of my kayak instead of going sideways where it kept wanting to tip over.
Yeah.
So I used the back end of my kayak and I lifted myself up from the back end.
So he essentially dragged himself, he grabbed it and like pulled and dragged himself on the back end of it, which is actually, you know, kudos to Ernesto's smart thing to do. When you're in that waves and you're trying to re-enter from the side, all it takes is for that wave you're trying to pull in, it's just going to turn back over because it's the weight, you got your body weight pushing it down and naturally wants to flip over. The waves are just helping it do that. So if you're in wavy conditions, it can be even harder to re-enter from the side, which is why entering from the back and doing what he did, which is grabbing on and essentially you're just crawling yourself on there from the back, and then you will end up, you know, crawling over to your seat and get back in. Could be a better option when you are in those wavier conditions. You know, you're heading in the kayak. It's a lot more effort for it to flip front to back than from side to side
of the kayak, and I was able to get inside. I lost basically everything that was inside my kayak. You know, my battery, my trolling motor, or my kicker motor, my trolling motor battery. I lost it. My crate with all my equipment, I lost it. Luckily I had my paddle, and make sure when you put your paddle on, make sure you strap that paddle in, because if I didn't strap my paddle in, my paddle would have been gone.
That is literally the definition of being up Schitt's Creek, right? Leash, 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 leash your gear. If you value it, leash it down. And that's essentially what he's getting at here. Your batteries, leash it down, bungee it down. Your rods, if they're not in use, keep them in your crate. You can use leashes for that. Even while they're in a rod holder, if you're using them, trolling with them, you can have leashes there. There's quite a few that are like detachable, meaning you hook them up, but there's like a little clip in the middle of it that you can easily clip on and off, so that it's leashed while it's in the rod holder. You get a fish, you can pull it out, unclip it, and now you have free use of the rod without the leash holding you back. They make those as well, which is a good option for your leashing on the rods that are on your rod holders. But leash your stuff down. It will help alleviate the issue of losing gear. They also make some tackle boxes that will float in the water, so that might be something I would recommend making the investment to have those tackle boxes that will float in case you do. And look, you might not even flip out. It could just be you fumbled it, you go to reach back behind you and you drop it in the water. I've done that quite a few times, and it floats, so you can go back and use your net to get it back out of the water. These are like these little intricacies that sometimes people don't think about, that I think is worth highlighting as we continue to talk about the learning lessons from Ernesto's near-death experience here.
I do have a backup paddle inside my compartment, but keep in mind, you know, the water temperature is 42, 43 degrees. Luckily, you know, the day was, you know, it's about 60, 65 degrees out, sun. So the air temperature, you know, it was okay. But I was still a mile from shore, and my body's, I'm freezing at this point. But luckily I had my paddle with me, I had my phone with me, I had my emergency radio in there, and just a couple things that, you know, that I learned from this is have your emergency equipment somewhere on your vest.
Yes.
In case you can't get back on your kayak. You know, I have my emergency radio strapped on to the kayak.
Yeah.
But if I couldn't get back into my kayak for whatever reason, all I had was my cell phone, which was in my pocket. But if my cell phone wasn't in my pocket or for whatever reason, then, you know, I would have been out there swimming back to shore.
Yeah, listen, keep these things in your PFD. Your knife, some type of air horn, a reflective glass in case you need to use, you know, the sunlight to get people's attention with the reflective glass, even a compass in there, and your your radio, your VHF radio should be clipped onto your PFD. You know, and I say this is even for me, I get complacent with this as well. And so this is a reminder to me that I need to, you know, get this thing on my vest, because I tend to have a habit of just putting it off my side too. So again, this is why we're going through this, right? This is learning for all of us, a reminder for all of us, even for myself included. I'm no exception to any of this. And he's, you know, sharing that, right? Put all this stuff on your PFD. So if you go in, you have tools to help in your recovery and your safety as well.
And who knows how long I would have lasted a mile offshore in 42, 43 degree weather.
He doesn't. In no world do you make it back a mile offshore in 40-degree temps swimming back. You don't. That's the reality of it. I mean, if we're being really real, you're not. So your paddle 100% should always be strapped to your kayak, no matter what. That is your last resort lifeline to get back to shore.
You know, I'm grateful that I was able to, you know, to fight through it. You know, there was, when I was underwater gasping, you know, gasping for air, you know, it's not like when you hit that water and you're underneath, you know, it's not like you're holding your breath. You know, the first thing that happened was when I went under and my head's underneath that water, is I'm swallowing all that water is going through my nose. You know, I'm in panic mode. You know, you're like, you got all these things going through your, you know, is this how I die today? And you know, but you're fighting through it. You're trying to fight through it and do what you can. You know, I didn't have, you know, any protective clothing to help with the water, and you know, and it's something that I strongly recommend after this. You know, I had some, you know, Under Armour 3.0 stuff on, and that's obviously not going to help anything. No. You know, I had some extra layers of clothing on, hoodies and stuff like that, but once that all gets wet, you know, it doesn't do you anything.
No, that will actually work against you. Wearing jeans, I see people wear their some of the gear that they wear in a boat, they'll wear waders and stuff like that. You know, all bad things to wear. The minute they get wet, it's added weight that you have to now try and drag up and bring into the kayak with you, right? It just adds more weight, and as well as potentially holding you back from you know, getting back in, right? If you have waders up, you know, that water goes into the waders, it's gonna weigh you down. So there's definitely things that you want to wear and things that you don't want to wear while you're out in the water. You know, any kind of cotton, it's just going to absorb the water and hold, it's just going to add weight to you. A dry suit is essentially what he's talking about that he did not have. He had, you know, I can't tell you how clutch a dry suit is. It is worth the spend in getting a good dry suit. I actually have some linked in my Amazon shop. I'll link to it down below. It's down there. You can check it all out. It's worth the investment, guys, to come home to your family, your kids, your loved ones for the, I don't know, good ones could be in the $400 to $800 range. But if you take care of it, it will last you for years. I've had mine now for, God, 5+ years. So make the investment in a dry suit. It does wonders. I put up a picture on my Instagram at the start of the season for my first shakedown trip. I went out, I got in the water. I was fully submerged all the way up to my neck and made sure that the dry suit did not leak. I sat in the water for a few minutes, no leakage. I know it's good to go. Also, it lets me get a sense of familiarity with what it feels like to be in very cold water. You know, to explain the experience, essentially I feel cold all around me, but I don't feel it on me. And that's the best way I could kind of describe it. So I feel that it's cold, but because it's not touching my skin and I'm not wet, I'm not feeling that, oh my God, you know. So that's what allows you, gives you the time. That's what it is. It gives you the time, the added time to recover. You can take your time, get your composure, and then you can recover yourself. So highly recommend it. Make that investment for yourself.
You know, so I hope with this video right here, you know, it will help you understand, and it definitely helps me understand the importance of having additional safety equipment, having additional clothing. I had an extra bag of clothing just in case if something like this was to happen, and I left it at home. You know, I was in a rush to get out, go do some fishing, and I left my backpack with my protective or my extra clothing at home. It's not worth it. You know, the water's going to be here, the fish is going to be here.
Yes.
Make sure you protect yourself, make sure you have everything that you need, and you know, I'm just grateful that I was able to get through it, and you know, I'm here. So,
and this is important what he says right here. It's okay to not go fish for the day, guys. You know, and I get that if that's the 1 or the 2 days that you have the fish and that's all you got, you really want to get out there, but it's really not worth the risk. These fish will be here. Sure, it's an inconvenience, and yes, you may want, you know, you're going to be bummed out about it, but don't put yourself at risk for these fish. You know, wait for another day to get back out here. I tend to see more and more guys taking riskier chances going out in the water conditions. And, you know, you're putting yourself at risk, you know, and not just yourself, but others that may have to come in and assist you and rescue you. So just be smart about these days and the conditions on when you decide to go out. Don't push it, you know, really don't push it. So let's go ahead and jump ahead here to him doing his fishing, and we're going to see the aftermath. Now, it doesn't look like he was able to record him actually falling in. However, he's got video footage of him on after when he got back into the kayak. So let's take a look at this.
But no luck, came off.
So this is the aftermath right here. You see the gear floating away in the distance. He's got he's in there.
It came out of nowhere and just flipped me. Oh boy, it is cold. That was super scary. Lucky I had my jacket on. Oh, you know what? It's I'm just glad I was able to get on my kayak.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, I was right. On that day, you had the winds coming out of the northeast, so it's blowing him into shore, which is helping him because, you know, he's not going to exert too much energy, but still not in a great situation.
All right, I'm almost at shore right now. That was scary. That was super scary. Super scary.
I mean, you can see in the distance, you got whitecaps happening out here. You know, again, if it's summertime, water's warmer, north of 60, you know, you have time to recover. But when the water's this cold, even when these whitecaps out here, you know, my personal take is not worth it, because you fall in, man, you are really, you know, pushing it, you know. So whitecaps are out there happening. Just wait for another day, or just fish right in front of the harbor. Stay close, stay much closer.
I'm cold, super cold. Oh God, I lost my shoes. Fuck.
So that's the end of his video right here. Words can't express how shocking this is, and grateful to see that he's still here to share his story, because this could have ended very badly. But hopefully you guys are watching this will use this as just a reminder to take those safety precautions seriously, protect yourself, and maybe it's good for us to look out for each other. I definitely recommend going out with a buddy when you're going out in the Lake Michigan. Doesn't matter the time of year, whether it's spring, summer, fall, winter, whatever. Go out with a buddy. It's another layer of safety for them to assist you. If they see you go in, they can call for help immediately and then assist you. Go with a buddy system, and that will go a long way as well. So hopefully you guys found this video of use. Be safe out there this season. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you to Captain Ernesto for sharing this with us all to learn from and talk about. And again, I'll link to his channel and this video down below for you guys to check out if you want to watch it the full way through without me commentating throughout it. Thank you guys for watching again. I'll talk to you guys next time.